You are now listening to Testimonies with Terry.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of Testimonies with Terry. I'm your host, Terry Skaggs, and thanks a lot for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Testimonies with Terry on social media and leave those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Well, as you all know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. According to the CDC, 255,000 women get breast cancer in the United States each year, and unfortunately, 42,000 women pass away due to breast cancer each year. Today, however, you're going to hear the testimony of one woman who beat the cancer with the help of Jesus. And not only that, you're going to hear how this amazing woman also overcame an eating disorder and doubts about finding a man who'd be willing to walk with her through the after effects of cancer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ashley Benoit's testimony. All right, guys. Well, I am here with Ashley Benoit. I'm super excited for everyone to hear your story. Ashley, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you and I were just talking about The Office here a little bit. What, something that both of us enjoy. What would you say is your favorite episode of The Office?
Ooh. You know, this is where I always get some flack because two of my favorites right away are Scott's Tots.
Oh, man.
Which people hate. And the dinner party is the second one.
Yes.
That other people just cringe about.
Yes.
But I also, in true girl fashion, love Niagara. I mean, when Jim and Pam get married.
It's a great wedding.
Makes me cry every time. And the finale, too, was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Michael coming back at the end.
Oh, yeah. So many good moments.
Yeah. Who's your favorite character, the character you maybe relate to the most?
You know, I obviously love Michael. I think he's hilarious. But I feel like Pam she's just my girl.
Mm-hmm.
I just think she's the best.
Yeah.
So, yeah, probably Pam.
Well, Ashley, I've been finding through this podcast, when I'm interviewing people, it's like, I know these people, but I don't know these people. And so I've known you for a couple years at least, but never really had a super in-depth conversation with you. I've heard bits and pieces of your story and your testimony, and I knew when I started this podcast, I'm just like, I got to get Ashley on. So super pumped to have you on. I'm wondering if we can just start at the beginning, if you can just kind of talk about where did you grow up and what family life was like for you?
Yeah. So I grew up in Painesville, Minnesota. It's about actually like 15 minutes from here. I swore that I would never come back to small town life when I left for college, and here we are. But grew up in a home where my dad was a pastor. So I've been in ministry most of my life. And I have two brothers, one older, one younger, only girl. So obviously highly favored.
What was that like for you? Because I'm the only boy in my family. I got 3 sisters. So I, experienced the opposite of that. What was it like growing up the only girl?
Yes. I mean, for sure, I got away with a lot more than my brothers did. To a certain extent. But yeah, it was good. Just a different relationship all around.
Did you feel like a pretty good sense of protection or maybe overprotection between your dad and your 2 brothers looking out for you?
Yeah, I would say definitely protected. I mean, my younger brother is 18 months younger than me. So we shared a lot of the same friends and hung out with a lot of the same people. And then my older brother is 5 years older than me. So the protection piece definitely came more so from my older brother. And then my dad in general, I mean, like, my dad did so much for us. He was, like, every Saturday he would clean and vacuum my vehicle. He would fill it with gas. This sounds so terrible. I can't believe I'm telling you this, but I did not know how to pump my own gas until I went to college because my dad always did that.
Oh, man.
Terrible. Talk about shock.
So I'm just trying to picture you like driving up to the gas pump, on your own for the first time and like, what do you do? Do you just get out and like
just fake it till you make it? Yeah. So they always took really good care of me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. What was it like growing up as a pastor's kid, and growing up in a family that was in ministry?
Oh, I loved it. Honestly, from an early age, so my dad's always been in ministry. Before, I spent most of my life in Painesville, but before that, we had been at a few churches in the cities. And I had always loved it. I've always been an extrovert since, like, literally the moment I was born, I was an extrovert. And so the idea of being able to, like, be in constant community was such a big thing for me. They used to always make fun of me because when I remember being like, I don't know, 7 years old and loving greeting time at church because I could run around and see everybody. And so it's always like, it's been something that's been ingrained in me since a very young age, and I've always loved it.
Were you yourself involved in your family's church in any role throughout your childhood?
Yeah, so I started leading worship when I was like probably 12 or so, just with like youth worship, things like that.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, progressed more into adult worship, being on that team. And so that's really, I feel like, where I developed a true love and passion for ministry, especially worship ministry, was just being able to develop that involvement at such a young age in our church. And so it's been really cool to see how that has now paved the way to where I am now.
So where are you now?
Yes. So I serve at River of Life Church. Technically, my role is the media and marketing director, but I also get to lead worship every week with my husband, Derek, who is the worship pastor here.
So full circle moment
Yes.
there, kind of.
Yes, it's actually funny because I went to school for music pastoral studies. That's also what Derek went for. And in college, he was like the one who excelled at everything. I mean, he was like the best of the best. Everybody knew Derek Benoit is so good. And I was the one who was like scraping the bottom of the barrel trying to get through. And I remember when we graduated, I sat down with the dean, and he asked me, what is like one of your biggest takeaways from North Central, and that's where I went to college, and this program. And I was like, you know what, Dr. Dave, I've realized that I do not want to be a worship pastor. There's no way I want to do this. And I told him, all I want to do is like do something creative and then marry someone who's in ministry and be able to lead worship with them. I just want to work as a team with someone. And he just kind of laughed like, well, good thing you just went to college for the last 4 years studying this. Good luck. And then look where we are now. I'm serving in a creative role and married to someone and get to do worship full time.
Doing exactly what you wanted to do.
Exactly.
That's
cool.
Crazy. That's kind of a testimony in and of itself,
totally.
right?
Honestly, it's so much favor. There was, to backtrack a little bit. So I went, when I had originally decided to go to North Central, my parents were supportive, but they were hesitant for sure of me pursuing worship. And so they had really tried to encourage me to consider other options like nursing or, the safe fields, which I get lightheaded and tunnel vision and blackout at the smallest injuries. People even talking about them, I do not handle well. So I tried being a CNA for like a minute, did not work. It was terrible. And then I started out at North Central studying music business, thinking like, well, at least I'm still in the music world, but attach business to it, whatever, that's safe. But I really felt a strong tug in my heart, like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I know that I'm supposed to be pursuing worship ministry. And so for my parents, that was hard for them to fully support, just because, for me to say like, I'm going to go to this private school and spend all of this money, and then I'm going to go work for a local church and be a worship leader, I can understand where their concern was. But I just felt so strongly like if I'm not doing worship ministry, then that is where I feel most comfortable. It's where I feel most myself, is when I'm on stage leading people into worship. And so for me to be able to step into that was really, I would say, a step of faith for me. Being able to like tell the Lord, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I know that like I'm not going to make millions of dollars, and I'm not going to have a 9-to-5 schedule and all these different things that most people really desire, the world says is good and right. But I felt like I can't imagine doing anything else. And that's where I'm at right now. Like, both Derek and I say often, we could go work a normal 9-to-5, and we could have, normal in our lives, but we wouldn't be fulfilled. We just love what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's awesome, just the obedience that you have in that, just going fully after what God has called you to do. I was listening to a sermon actually on the way into our interview this morning, and the pastor was talking about a picture of Billy Graham at his cabin shortly before he passed. And in the picture, he was so content. And Billy Graham had said it's because he knew he spent his life doing what God had called him to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think just seeing your obedience in that, I mean, you're not going to be Billy Graham's age for many, many years, but I have no doubt that, man, you and Derek are both going to just be able to sit back and look back at your life and be like, yeah, we did what God called us to do.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy for me to hear that you were scraping the bottom of the barrel at North Central, because anyone that's listened to you knows that you can sing. Not sing, but sang. You got some pipes on you. And so that's just crazy. When you say scraping the bottom of the barrel, are you comparing yourself talent-wise to other people, or are you just talking about the grades that you would get? Or?
Oh, all of it. So I would say I've always been a good student. I mean, throughout high school, I was a great student, graduated top of my class. When I went to college, had great grades as well with my general courses. But keep in mind, I came from a small church in a small town where I was really one of the only people who was leading worship. And so as far as quote unquote competition goes, I didn't have that many people to really compete with, I guess, to make myself better. And then I go to North Central where there's, everyone and their mother can play guitar and play beautiful piano and sing and hit these notes that I've never even heard before. And then with the music program, it's just a very strict, rigid program that is pretty difficult. There's a ton of music theory behind it, and I had taken lessons most of my life, but I never enjoyed lessons. And so for me, it was so hard for me. I just wanted to lead worship. I didn't care about the practicality and the science behind music. I just wanted to sing. But really, I needed those things in order to be better. And so the music program was really difficult for me, just walking through music theory. Keep in mind, it was every day at 7:45 a.m. and I had to walk at least a mile to get to the building. And so it was crazy. But honestly, it made me so much better as a musician, as a worship leader, as a student. And now I'm so I teach piano lessons now. I have about 9 students, and I stress theory so strongly to them. And they, there's some of them who just love it. They come alive with it. There's others who dread it. And I just have to keep telling them, there's so much practicality in this. You have to learn this. You have to know this. And so it's good. I took away a lot from it. But for Derek, he was such a natural with it. He was excellent with everything that he did. So I scraped by with the music program. But we made it. You know what? C's get degrees.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Sometimes D's do too.
Well, and I think that goes to show too that God does use everything.
Oh yeah.
Even if you didn't think that you were going to use music theory, here you are.
Here we are.
Teaching it, and sounds like even just maybe enjoying it a little bit, or definitely seeing the usefulness of it.
Definitely.
And then it sounds like overall you went from, growing up doing worship, kind of that big fish in a small pond, to, leaving little, hinky-dink, Painesville, going to the Twin Cities, and now you're a small fish in a huge pond.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like you maybe got caught up in the comparison game while you were down there. Mm-hmm. What was kind of the key for you to get out of that game, get out of that trap, and to just kind of focus on you and your gifts, your talents, and the calling that God had for you?
Yeah. I think there's definitely a mold that a lot of worship leaders can easily fall into. You look at these big name worship teams across really the world that are leading us right now. And it's so easy to want to be specifically like them. And so especially when I was in college, it was really difficult for me because I wanted to do all of the things. You know, I wanted to be this incredible soprano who could sing these high notes that were like Carrie Job. And I wanted to be like, like a Kim Walker who would just rock you with like her powerful low notes. And I wanted to be like this gentle, sweet worship leader who was just like so easy to listen to, but also wanted to be like the hype girl, you know? And so it was like I was chasing after all of these little things, trying to be this one worship leader with all of these different characteristics, I guess. But really, what it came down to was I ended up getting involved in a church in the cities. Fantastic church. I served there all throughout college, and I had really, really great mentors there who just helped me really hone in on like what I truly loved, where my giftings were, and how I could best thrive, I guess, survive in that way. And so I think the biggest thing for me was just being able to recognize like, you know, I maybe am not going to be this Kim Walker or Carrie Job or, you know, you name it. But I do get to be Ashley Benoit. And so where is it that, like, how can I best minister to people through the gifts that I have? And so being able to recognize those things and walk in that. And those are things I'm still learning. I mean, I feel like, honestly, every single year that goes by, I'm learning more about myself as a worship leader and how I can best engage our congregation. Because here even, we have so many talented people who are on the stage with us, incredible volunteers who we get to share our time with. And it's easy for me to want to be more like this person or this person, but that's not who God called me to be. You know, he called me to be Ashley, and this is what you do. So being able to really go against that path of comparison and the lies of the enemy, because that's the biggest thing too, is like creatives. I think we can all resonate with this. When we feel like our art is being criticized, I guess, or we're maybe not the best, that's personal, you know, because our art is a part of who we are. So like my voice, my singing, my worship leading, that's who I am. That is me being the most vulnerable that I can to people. And so if I'm not like feeling like I did the best that I could, or, you know, maybe this person did a better job for me, which those thoughts creep in for sure, then it's easy for me to want to take a step back and then, you know, start to get maybe like, I don't know, sometimes I'll get like frustrated or discouraged, or like, do I even want to be doing this anymore, you know? Mm-hmm. And so being able to really step into, again, what I was talking about earlier, into who it is that God's called me to be, what type of worship leader God's called me to be, and being able to also just like support those around me who are different than me, because that's what the church is. Like, that is the beauty of believers and the talents that we have and creatives. Like, that's who God put bits and pieces of himself in each of us, and we all get to now explore that together.
That's a great way of looking at it. And on behalf of River of Life and everyone that gets to hear you sing every week, thank you for being you, because you're doing a great job. And you're right. We have an incredible worship team, so many talented volunteers, like you said, mm-hmm. and for you and Derek to lead the way. Thank you for leading us into worship every week. You. Going back to your childhood, so you grew up in Paynesville, you know, in the church, in ministry. What was school like for you? Did you go to public school? Were you homeschooled?
Yep. Public school. So had the full experience. I was always involved in like every extracurricular activity I could. I was a part of different like dance teams, things like that throughout high school. I even a couple of seasons was like the softball manager, a basketball manager, because I was not good at those sports. But I just like wanted to be around people all the time. So I would take any opportunity that I could to be able to be a part of the team.
What struggles did you face throughout, you know, especially like middle school, high school? Those are kind of tougher years for everyone. Oh, yeah. What kind of struggles did you go through?
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest parts of my story is, you know, talking about the idea of comparison. So I have struggled with insecurity most of my life. And that began at a really young age, just with a few different circumstances that happened when I was about like 7 or 8. And that carried into probably like my early 20s, mid 20s. And with that resulted in eating disorder. So I would say in like middle school and high school, there's already so many pressures to like fit in and figure out who you are. And then you add in like all of the changes that are happening. And for me, I was super insecure. And having a dance background, gymnastics background, those types of things, you learn really quickly about like body image and things like that. And so from a pretty young age, I struggled with a pretty severe eating disorder that I carried with me through, like I said, like my mid 20s or so. And so I would say like for me, there was always this feeling of like not measuring up, not being good enough, and, not looking my best. And so not being able to like be fully present in those moments because I was so concerned of like how much I weighed or what I looked like or, things like that.
What kind of eating disorder did you have?
So I struggled with bulimia primarily, but also like throughout college that went more into anorexia and different things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I can relate to that. I struggled with anorexia when I was in middle school and in college some. What was that like, throughout that time dealing with the eating disorder? Is it something that you felt like you could hide and that people couldn't see? Or did you have people, family, friends that noticed that, hey, you don't seem like yourself, something's wrong here?
I definitely had people around me who noticed some changes. Unfortunately, in my family, there are times where communication has not always been our strong suit. And I think that really any of my family members would agree with that. Unfortunately, I think especially growing up in a pastor's home and feeling that pressure to be perfect, I put a lot of that pressure on myself. That's not necessarily something that my parents did. That was something I did. That is what triggered a lot of my emotions and my feelings. So when it came to me struggling, I do remember a specific time where someone who was very close to me did ask me if I was struggling. But then before I could answer, they said I would be very disappointed to hear if you were.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so I felt like that just shut the door right away for me to ever feel like I could be open about it again. And so that was something I kept hidden for a long time. And, there were different seasons. Like sometimes I was really good. And then there were other times, as you know, where like my mind would spiral and things would be really terrible. I would say it got the worst in college. But at that point, I was completely on my own. I was my freshman year, I'm just meeting a bunch of people. So I could do whatever I wanted. And people didn't really know my habits and things like that. And so it ended up being something that I started talking about a little bit more, becoming more open about as I got a little bit older, and ended up actually going to counseling later on and being able to work through it and recognizing the why and even, the idea of being able to struggle well, because I think it's something, like Paul talks about the thorn in his flesh. I really do think like, I know that God can heal and I have seen that, I believe that, and I'm still praying that over myself in my mind. But I also feel like this could be the thorn in my flesh that causes me to struggle well, that reminds me to be dependent on the Lord. So they're struggling and they're struggling well. So I can struggle or I can continue to have thoughts, but take those thoughts captive and continue to be dependent on the Lord. And so with that, I've experienced a lot of healing in my mind and recognizing like, the days get easier. And it's been, like 5 years now since 5 or 6 years since I've really struggled in that sense.
Praise God.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was the point that made you decide or made you realize I need to get some help?
Mm-hmm. I had some health issues years back. And I remember I had been in a doctor's appointment. It was before I had like really started to get sick. But my body, I had a bunch of bruises on my body because at that point this was still in college. I was losing quite a bit of weight that like I just would bruise super easily. And I remember sitting in a doctor's appointment by myself and the doctor had said like, are you doing okay? Are you struggling at all? And I just, played face like, no, I'm fine. Everything's fine. And at that point, the doctor had said like, I I know what's going on right now. I can tell. And I just need you to know that, like, this is not just affecting you now. Like, you know, you just sat here. Because in that appointment, we had talked about, like, you know, my dreams of one day being a wife and a mother and all these things. And she was like, this isn't just affecting you right now. Like, if you continue down this path, this will affect, you know, the ability of one day you being able to have children. And these are things that you need to start working on now. And so it was after that appointment that I really started to try to get healthy. And like I said, that was not like, oh my gosh, okay, one day I'm just like totally fine, everything's good to go. But being able to just take small action steps. So starting small, but starting now, and being able to walk in that. And like I said, counseling, when I started that was huge for me, being able to figure out the why and talk through things. And then being able to find accountability. And so, you know, my husband, he's been fantastic in that sense. But also my best friend, Rachel, she's incredible. She's been a support to me for the last 10 years. I mean, she's been there at like some of my lowest moments. And so she still will check in with me, like usually every couple of weeks, just to see like, hey, how's your mind doing? Like, are you struggling? Are you like, what are things that you can be getting better in? How can I be praying for you in these situations?
Sounds like you have a great support system around you.
Yeah.
What were some of the revelations that you got in counseling that helped you overcome the eating disorders?
Ooh. You know, I think mostly just being able to realize, like, I think, so at the same time, my husband, who I was dating at the time, was also going through counseling for different things. And it's so easy. It was so easy for me before that. He had been doing counseling before I had been. And it was so easy for me to look at the situation and be like, oh, he needs this, like, grew up in like a broken home, like without a father, those types of things. Like, it makes sense why he is going through counseling, and not realizing then, like, for me, no, this is beneficial for me too. And so he was the one who actually encouraged me to start doing it. And so being able to realize, like, the root issues of, obviously, like, I struggled with my self-image, but there were reasons why. So I never understood the whys. And so being able to, like, trace it back to as, like, early as, you know, such a young age of 7 years old, and realizing, like, oh, this is kind of what started things. And, oh, I respond in this way because of the relationship that I had with this person. Or, and so honestly, just from, like, such a young age, realizing the triggers that led me to where I am now, it felt like that was one of the only things that I could really have control over. And, you know, I would say I'm a control freak in some sense. And so full circle, just being able to recognize, like, all these different things from an early age on. I don't know. I know that's like a ton of information and kind of vague, but yeah, realizing the different relationships and how they, I guess, triggered different things within me.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I like how you hit on the control piece.
Mm-hmm.
I know, again, speaking from my own experience, that was a major part of my eating disorder.
Yeah.
You feel like everything around you is out of control and there's nothing you can do about it. And so you kind of zone in on that one thing you can control, and it spirals downward really quickly.
Yep.
And I think another thing, you know, again, speaking from my own experience of kind of keeping, I don't know what you'd call it, like sobriety or like just like recovery from an eating disorder, is really kind of identifying your triggers of knowing that, hey, if I am around this or exposed to this, or if someone says this, that could be a trigger for me. Have you been able to identify your triggers?
Oh yeah, big time. Yep. So I know, like, you know, there's different things on Instagram that I like can't follow. A lot of those things are like different fitness accounts or different things like that, where that will cause me to spiral some, or, you know, like, my husband and I just had this conversation. There's like the latest trend lately in the fitness world has been like what I eat in a day kind of thing, these posts that they share. And it's this abundance of food, and it's always like 3,000 calories, you know, 5,000 calories. And in my mind, immediately I'm thinking, like, you can't do that. There's no way you can do that. And how can you look like that if you do that? You know, you have to, there has to be something that you're doing on the side. And so those I recognize are probably more so triggers for me. But like for me, I know that, and this isn't the case for everybody, but like I had a tendency to binge a lot of the things that I was eating. And so for me, I have tracked religiously what I eat, literally everything that I eat for years. And some people will say that's like, I mean, I'm sure it is an element of control for sure. But for me, being able to recognize like these are the things that I'm eating and making sure that I'm hitting all of my goals as far as like proteins, fiber, carbs, those types of things. If I'm not doing those things, then it's that much easier for me to be like, oh, I'm just going to have this, and then I'm going to have more of this, and I'm going to have more of that. And then I feel terrible at the end of the night. And then I feel like, well, I know how I could solve this, but I'm not going to do that. So then I'm struggling with like some inner anxiety of like, well, now I know I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to step on the scale. And so these are like things that I still feel like I walk through pretty frequently, but being able, again, to go to the Word, take every thought captive, be in prayer. Like something that I have to pray over myself every single day is just having self-control. And some of that is like, this sounds like such a silly prayer, but I will pray every day, like, Lord, help me to have self-control in what I'm eating and how much I'm eating. Like, let this be something that's beneficial to my body, that brings it life, that brings it health. Like, I don't want to just like eat to eat or do, make poor decisions. Like I want to eat and put into my body, I guess, things that glorify you and bless you and bring me healthy thinking. And so I know it's such a silly prayer, but I feel like it really does set my mind straight.
Well, I don't think it sounds silly. I think that just shows that you're very aware
Yes.
of what you need.
Yeah.
You're practicing mindfulness, and
Yes.
that's probably something that you learn in therapy as well.
Big time.
But just being aware of, hey, this is something that I could struggle with today. This is something that I need help with. And like, the only person who can really help me with this is my creator, is Jesus Christ. And so to me, I don't think that sounds silly. I think that shows wisdom and just good self-awareness.
Thank you.
What would you say to anyone who's currently struggling with an eating disorder, struggling with body image, particularly, women, young women? What would you tell them? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I would say right away, find help. I mean, that was the biggest thing for me that I wish I would have done at a younger age. It's so easy to feel like, well, one, to be able to feel like this isn't really that big of a problem. It's fine. I have control over it. But that spirals really quickly. So being able to find someone that you trust, whether that's like a youth leader or a mentor or whatever that might be, being able to find someone who maybe you even know has struggled in the same thing, that they can hold you accountable and be able to get you on the right track. The other thing is counseling. Counseling, I think, has a stigma to it, but it's such a beautiful thing. Like, I would not be where I am today if I hadn't gone through counseling. I think it's crucial. I think everybody should be in counseling. And so if that's something that you would want to pursue, I know Terry has great resources on that and could definitely get you hooked up with that.
We'll go back to high school. You graduate high school, or senior year. Let's go to senior year of high school. Did you know what you wanted to do right, after you graduated?
I had a pretty good idea of it. I knew that like I had said, I wanted to do music. I had a few different offers to be able to dance. I had been looking at different schools that offered different programs for that. So being able to study different things and then dance on the side and do that just as like continuing through college. I never wanted to like pursue a career in dance. I just always enjoyed it. And so I knew, though, I had made some choices in my later years of high school that I was not going down the best path, I guess. Just going back to that idea of insecurity and wanting to fit in and do all these things. Like, I definitely walked through a season of making poor decisions, poor choices, following the crowd, I guess. And so I knew that if I didn't go to North Central, then I probably wasn't going to make good decisions at other schools. For those of you who don't know, North Central is a Christian school. They've got some pretty, I don't want to say strict guidelines, but you are able to, they put a huge emphasis on building your faith through the classes that you're taking. And so I recognized at that point, like I needed to make a change. And so I decided I would go to North Central and pursue music. So again, as I had said, I knew that I wanted to pursue some type of music. In what capacity, I wasn't totally sure. But yeah, I would say in high school, my senior year, I still always had felt like, yeah, I'll probably go to North Central. I'll probably do this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so leaving home, again, leaving the small pond mm-hmm. and going to, kind of the big ocean there, the Twin Cities, I can't help but think about, faith. You grew up in the ministry, grew up in a home, that was just ingrained in you. When you went off to college, how firm in your faith did you feel? Like, did you feel like you had made like your faith your own? And just talking to other PKs, pastors' kids, I know that sometimes that can be a hard transition to go from kind of like living off your family's faith to then making it your own. So what was that like for you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I think it's funny that I felt like North Central would be like my saving grace, because who you are attracts like-minded people. And so when I went to college, I had definitely good friends for sure, but there was also different people who I found myself being attracted to, navigating to, that also made poor decisions. And so my first year of North Central, I feel like I definitely I continued on that path of poor decisions. And I think that's because I had relied so heavily on my parents' faith growing up that I didn't even know how to make it my own. Like I never got into the word. Like the idea of praying more than like 2 minutes was like, how does anybody do this? And so it wasn't until fast forward a little bit, I ended up leaving North Central after my first year, just from some financial decisions, realizing like I wasn't totally set in what I wanted to do. My parents and I still weren't seeing totally eye to eye on it. And so I knew that I needed to just take a little bit of time off because I was still making these poor decisions. I'm learning now that maybe I was running. Oh man.
What do you think you were running from?
I think just the idea of failing, and I never wanted to hit rock bottom. And so when the going got tough, it was easy for me to just jet and find something different and hope that would maybe work out. So I ended up having an opportunity. We have some great friends who live down in Sarasota, Florida. And there was an opportunity that was presented to me to go down there and work, help out a little bit with like a local church down there, and live with one of our friends. And so I felt like, well, I'm not really doing anything else right now, so I could just do this for a season. And I really feel like that was the season where I got my life on track. So I ended up moving down to Sarasota. I really didn't know that many people at all, just like, our couple of friends, family friends that we had, got involved in this church and really started to build a community that was like people who were full of faith. And so being able to really take that season, it was just like a couple of months that I was down there, but taking that season to truly dive in and learn what it meant to have a true relationship in the Lord, like what it meant to open up my Bible and actually like be moved by what I was reading and transformed by it. And then being able to pray by myself and pray for others, pray for healing. Like, I just feel like it was such a season where my faith was increased. And I really believe that was like the turning point in my faith for me.
Mm-hmm. So cool that you had that opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard that your family lives in Florida now.
Yeah. Yes. So I was the first one to live down there. Ended up coming home because my dad had some health issues that he was struggling with at the time. So I came back home and did technical college for like a semester and then went back to North Central. But then a couple of years later, my parents had decided to transition out of ministry and just kind of pursue some different paths. And so they had always wanted to live somewhere warm, and because our family friends were down there and they knew they loved the area, they just decided like, well, we're in our 50s, let's go for it. And so they just picked up everything that they owned, moved down there. My younger brother lived down there for a season with them. He ended up back up here. And then my older brother lived down there for a season as well. He also ended up back up here. So my parents are still down there. They had they were fully convinced that our whole family would end up down there. I think now they'll probably end up back up here.
Funny how that works, right?
Yes.
And who would have thought, trading Florida for Minnesota, as far as you and your siblings, right?
Yep.
So then you go back to North Central and you go back to pursuing, music, and you end up graduating.
Yes.
After graduation, what do you do? What does life look like?
Yes. So I had gotten a call. I graduated in 2015. I got a call in 2014 from Denny Curran. And we've known Denny most of my life. So he's been in ministry really as long as I've been alive. And he had pastored at the church that my dad had been at prior. And so we had always had a relationship with him. My brother actually married one of his daughters. And so that connection has always been there. So Denny had called me when I was going into my senior year of college in 2014. I remember I was on a road trip with my older brother going to Virginia, and Denny had called and was like, "What do you think about coming and working for me?" And I was like, "Well, I still have a year of college left." He's like, "Well, what if we hired you and you came and just worked like a couple days a week?" I was like, "Oh, let me think on it." Well, I just felt like I don't want to end up in a small town. This is not where I feel called to. And I had been really involved at a church in the cities that I loved, and I really felt like there was a potential for me to be on staff there. And so I ended up calling him back and just letting him know, like, "Hey, I don't think this is the right timing. Like, thank you for thinking of me, but no thanks." So then he ended up calling me again in November of that year and saying like, "Well, why don't you just come to our house for Thanksgiving? You can just like maybe help with the service and just let us know what you think." So again, I came here, which is so crazy to me, led worship with Derek, I think, for that service, and still kind of felt like, no, I'm not really interested. So River of Life had used me a couple times after that. Like I came for a youth service and helped with this like dating and love series they were doing. They had Derek and I sing a love song, which at the time was like so weird to me that we would sing this love song. We both were so uncomfortable because we had been friends in college and we did music stuff together in college, but like not at all interested in one another. So the idea of like singing this intimate love song with one another in front of all these people was so awkward.
Yeah, I kind of cringed just hearing that.
Yes. And so we ended up, he ended up reaching out to me again in May of that year, or April or something, and had asked me again, like, so this was the third time. He's like, "You know what? I know that you've told me no now 2 other times, but," he said, "what if you just come out, spend the day, meet my staff, and then at the end of the day, if you feel like you absolutely don't want to be here, then fine, I won't ask you again." And so at the time I had went and met with my mentor who was on staff at the church that I had been attending and just let him know kind of what I was thinking and like wanted to see what the future looked like at this church. And, that church, like I said, incredible church. They were going through a ton of transition that was coming up in the next couple of months that I was not aware of. The senior pastor would be retiring, and there were just a lot of changes that were going to be happening. Eventually, that my mentor who I had at the time had stepped into the associate role at the church. And so I ended up just talking to him, and he's like, "You know what? Right now, I think if you have a door open, you should take it." So that really, I felt like that gave me a release in my heart of like, okay, I'm just going to pursue this and see if it doesn't work out, if I don't feel peace about it, then I know I can keep nannying, I can keep working here, like as an intern, I can keep serving. Great. And I ended up coming here on a Tuesday and just spending the whole day with the staff, met with Denny, got to hear his heart and vision a little bit. And I remember leaving thinking like, I don't want to be anywhere else. Like I have caught the vision. I love this church and I want to be a part of what they're doing. And so Denny ended up calling me the next day and offered me the position. So I ended up moving here like a month later, and now I've been on staff for 6 years.
Wow, that's crazy. So cool. Have you ever asked Denny why? Like, why did you want me so bad? Because I mean, what a compliment, what a honor for him to, 3 times, and I think there's something behind that number too, 3. Have you ever asked Denny, like, what was it about me that just you wouldn't give up on me?
Yeah. I think the thing that I love so much about Denny is that he's so intentional about the staff that he chooses. He hires people who he recognizes has different giftings than him. And so like one thing that he has always shared with me was that like, well, with all of our staff, I should say, is that he doesn't necessarily hire for talent. He hires for like personality and character, which that's not an insult, the fact that he doesn't hire for talent. In fact, it's like quite the opposite, the fact that he's willing to trust us and really, I guess, trust us to lead his church, his congregation, based off of what he sees in our personality and character. And so he'll always say that I light up a room. That's his go-to phrase for me, which is so sweet. And I think Denny loves so well. He's such a good pastor. And not only is he a good pastor, he's a great father figure. Like, he's been such a blessing to my husband and I. So my husband grew up in a home where his biological father was not present. He had a wonderful man who raised him, but that was later on. And so for Denny to step in and like really see that need for both Derek and I in that loving father figure who was here and present was such a beautiful thing for us. Like, we know that we can go to him for anything. And so all of that to say, I guess I haven't really asked him why. That's a good question. I think I need to now.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that.
Yeah, it's so funny.
So then you move back, 15 minutes from where you grew up. You never would have thought you'd be back in the area and, get your first kind of like full-time big girl job, right?
Yeah.
What happens next?
Yes. So, it was 2015 was just like a whirlwind of a year. So I graduate college. I moved to a new town. I'm really on my own, like, for the first time ever, in the sense that, like, I'm paying all my own bills. Throughout college, my parents were incredible and really helped me a lot. So I'm paying all my own bills. I'm finding a place to live. I have a salary, like all these different things that are crazy. Like, my car insurance is my own. I had a ton of friends who in that season of life were getting married. So it was like a ton of involvement in weddings and things like that. And in November of 2015, I have always loved like working out, health, exercise, things like that. And so I had really stepped up my game, I guess, in 2015 when it came to exercise. And I had noticed in November, as I said, of 2015, that I had found a lump in my chest. And so as I started to, I remember thinking like, this doesn't feel right. But again, we were in such a crazy season that I was like, I don't even have time to like get this looked into. Well, I ended up in December making an appointment because that lump had continued to grow. And I just started feeling a little bit like, I just remember I was getting really tired all the time. And like, I had lost a ton of weight in the course of 1 month. And it wasn't from my exercising. It wasn't from any of these things. Like, it just like fell off of me. And I just remember feeling like there's something wrong. So I ended up going to see my doctor in December, and she was wonderful, wonderful woman. But at the time, there had been a lapse in my health insurance. When I started at River of Life, I was at that like prime age of like where you're no longer on your parents' insurance, and then my insurance kind of dropped. Whatever, it was a long story. So I actually had no insurance at that point, and it wouldn't renew until January. And so I remember talking to my doctor about it. It was like probably the middle of December, and just sharing with her like, I don't have insurance, so if this is something that's like super crucial, then I guess let's look into it. But if not, like if we can just wait until January to really start looking into this, that would be awesome. And I remember her having her concerns, but also like us both coming to the conclusion of like, we're going into the holidays. I don't like, if something is wrong, I just want to be able to experience this holiday season normal. And so we ended up waiting. And then my first appointment was January 4th of 2016. And then from January 4th until January 15th, I did like every test in the book on this lump. And then on the 15th, on the 14th, I ended up getting a call from the clinic just saying like, hey, I think you need to come in and talk about this. And up until that point, I hadn't shared really with anybody. I think there was like 2 people that I had told that I was going in for appointments, just because I didn't think it was about that big of a deal. And then when it started to become a bigger deal, I didn't even know how to tell people. And And so I remember I was really open with Desiree St. John. She's one of my best friends. She's been a mentor to me for the last how many years. And then I remember my older brother, who's in the medical field, had noticed that I hadn't been feeling very well. Like he had just like picked up on different signs and things like that. And he just asked me one day, like, are you okay? What's going on? So I kind of shared with him a little bit, but I was very vague. And so on the 14th, I had to call all my family members and tell them like, oh, just so you know, I've been going in for all these tests and I think I might have cancer. So imagine how well my parents received that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom. So on the 15th, I ended up going in, and my doctor had shared with me that they had found breast cancer. And so, at that point I was 24 years old, not married, not in any type of relationship, just like really starting my life. And it's not like, for me, like I was young and I was healthy and like I was making the right choices with food. And I was like, I had just really stopped struggling with my eating disorder. And like all these like exciting big things were happening and my body was healthy, So the idea of receiving this diagnosis was such like a shock to not only me, but everyone really. Like there was really no cancer history in my family whatsoever. It was super random. And so I remember I had a great friend who had went with me to that appointment. And she just drove me around and we called people. And I remember my brother at the time worked for a tire place in St. Joe, and he had kind of known. And I remember just like pulling up to his shop and walking. I like get emotional.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, but walking inside, it's like he knew as soon as he saw it. And then like calling my older brother and telling him, and then telling my parents, and yeah, it's just like there's so much unknown in it, And then coming in that night, I had to tell Kirby and Desiree St. John. I had lived with them at the time. I said Desiree is like one of my best friends. So I told them, and then Denny and Cheryl had been out of town that weekend. They were getting back the next night. But my doctor had said, like, we need to move quickly. Like, this is very aggressive, so we need to start your treatment, like, Monday. And so I knew I had to get the word out immediately. One, to have people praying, but two, like, because I just have such strong connections with people, I didn't want to make anyone feel like I didn't want just anyone to find out on Facebook, like I felt like they deserved that phone call. And so I remember waking up the next morning and I called literally like 70 people and told them. It was such an exhausting day. And I remember so many people thinking like, this is so funny to me. I would call people and like, hey, I just need to tell you something. And everyone thought I was either going to say I was leaving River of Life or I was pregnant. Which both of them like, what? I wasn't dating anyone, and like I had just started. So super funny. But I ended up having all these conversations with people, letting them know. And then we had texted the staff like, hey, can we just have everyone meet tonight at Kirby and Des's house? And so Denny literally showed up, like all the staff was there. Denny showed up. I remember telling him like in one of their downstairs bedrooms, like, I just need you to know this before everyone else. I have cancer. I have no idea what this is going to look like, but we have to tell people now because like I have to start this stuff on Monday. And everyone, I just remember being so shocked. Like, again, everyone thought like, oh, Ashley's probably leaving. Like, that's why they called us here. And if you ask my husband, who he was on staff at the time too, he'll say, when I said I had cancer, he was like, oh, that's not so bad. Like, I thought you were going to say you were leaving.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, cancer did not seem like that big of a deal.
Oh, man.
It's so funny. And so, we ended up that night, the staff came around and just, like, prayed for me. And, like, we just came up with an action plan. The next morning, we told the church. And really, I started the process the next day of like chemo and surgeries and all of the things that go along with it. And so it was I say that it's like one of the fastest seasons of my life, but also like the most daunting, slowest seasons that I ever walked through. Because it's like, you receive this big news that is like such a tragedy to yourself personally, and people are there for you. Like, I had an incredible support system throughout the whole process, but like, life goes on for people, so you're stuck in this current tragedy and you're just trying to get through it, where other people, their lives are moving on. Like things are happening for them. It's exciting. And it can almost feel like you've been forgotten. And I know that that's not people's intentions at all. It's just like, this is life and this is where we're going. And so, I ended up for the next, that was from February until I went through chemo until June. And then it was around September that I feel like I finally started feeling a little bit of normalcy. And that was about 6 or 7 months.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I want to back up a little bit and go to that moment in the doctor's room. You're sitting, in the chair or on the table, and they come in and, give you those daunting words that no one wants to hear. You have cancer. Mm-hmm. You said you were shocked, rightfully so. What else was going through your mind? What were you feeling in that moment?
Yeah. I think I've always had a spirit of discernment, that gut intuition. And so going into it, I had a pretty good feeling of what they were going to tell me. And so surprisingly, I feel like I was really able to keep my emotions intact. And not even I was just trying to be strong for people, but I really just felt at peace about it. In those moments, obviously you think of the future. I just felt like, Lord, I know without a shadow of a doubt that I'm called to be a wife and a mother. And I feel like I have so much still ahead of me. And now that I received this news, this can't be it. I can't just receive all these things now and then oh, just kidding, you have cancer, you're gone, And so I think there was just such feelings of confusion of how is this going to play out? I don't even understand. But also in that confusion, I feel like I was oftentimes met with peace. Yeah. So don't get me wrong though. That season, there were some really good days and there were some really terrible days where I remember, it started out where I had surgery right away. They had to do a double mastectomy. And that is the worst thing in the world. Terrible, terrible recovery. And so I was in the hospital for 4 or 5 days after that. And when they had tested, they went in and checked my lymph nodes, things like that. And then they removed the tumor, which at that point had doubled in size from when they found it, from January 15th until February 4th. It doubled in size. Yep. So it was really rapidly growing.
Yeah. They weren't kidding when they said it was rapidly growing.
Yeah. And so at that point, I just was I felt so full of faith. I'm not going to need chemo. I'm healed. I'm good. We can move forward in this. And I remember getting the call. My mom was with me. We were sitting on the bed, and my doctor had called me, and she was like, because of your age and because of how rapid this tumor has been growing, and really because you are now in this spot of we don't really know what your future looks like. What's the chance of reoccurrence and things like that. She's like, I'm advising you that you need to do chemo. And I just remember feeling no, I had already been the cancer patient, but I still had my femininity is that word. Yep. I didn't look like a cancer patient. And I just was the idea of looking weak to others was so hard for me to grasp, because so far it was I already went through the surgery. I already had those things. I feel like part of my womanhood was already stripped from me and taken. And now all of a sudden I have to do chemo. Well, with chemo, there's a very good chance that, it does. Chemo destroys your reproductive system. And so at that point I'm thinking well, okay, so I've already been stripped of my womanhood, and now I'm being told that I have to do chemo, which means am I ever going to be able to have babies of my own? Am I ever going to am I ever going to find someone who wants to marry me, who's really willing to take that risk, and feeling just what the heck, God, where are you now? And so I had less than 2 weeks before I had to start chemo. And so I had to go through the process then of fertilizing my eggs, doing all these things for the possibility of well, there's a chance one day you could use these, maybe not. You never know. And so having to do that, and then...
Which again, sorry to interrupt, but at 24 years old to be going through all that, man, I can't imagine.
Yeah. it's just a ton of choices. And I kept thinking, like, selfishly, this would be so much easier if I had someone to make these choices with, you know? Like, even when it came to freezing my eggs. So, back history with my husband. I knew from, like, July of 2015, actually, I was going to marry him. I was like, it wasn't like one of these cheesy things like God told me you're going to marry him. It was just one of those situations where I was like, I know this is who I'm going to marry. He felt it too, but he was much slower moving than I was. And so now fast forward to freezing my eggs in February and doing all these things, or January. I remember actually being in this period of like, do I want to do this or do I not? Because it's very expensive, it's very invasive on your body, and it's very time consuming. And it's 2 weeks of like giving away your life essentially. And I remember I ended up having someone who donated to pay for that, which like that is like $10,000, and someone paid for that, which, you know, right away that should have been my first time like, the Lord is in this.
Yeah.
But no, that wasn't enough for me. So then I just remember thinking like, this is way too invasive. Like I would have to drive to the cities every morning to do tests. And the cities from where we live is an hour and a half away. So the idea of doing that was like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna go from this? And I remember actually being very worked up one day, and Derek was in the office, and I remember again me thinking like, I think I'm gonna marry this guy. I remember feeling like I was having the conversation with him, and I was just telling him like, I don't even know if I want to do this. Like, it's not worth it to me. And I remember him saying, here's the thing, Ashley, if down the road I had someone that I was married to and they said, well, I mean, everything was paid for and it had the time frame like perfectly laid out and all these things, but I just was like, I just didn't want to do it. And that took away our possibility of being able to have kids. He's like, I would be disappointed, you know, like if you have this in front of you, I think you should do it. Like, yes, it's 2 weeks of your time that is inconvenient, but he's like, what happens down the road? Like if, you know, you're unable to have children, and this is what really saves you, is the process of being able to use your eggs that were harvested. So I remember thinking like, okay, well, you're probably the one I'm going to marry, so I'll do this for you.
What a trooper.
What a trooper. And so I ended up, going through that whole process, had my surgery, went through chemo, it was 4 rounds of chemo, and then had another surgery after that. And so, like I said, recovery ended up being like more so around like September. So where I started feeling like, okay, now we're stepping into some normal.
And what was chemo like?
Yes. You know, I would say that I had the best case scenario with chemo. So it's hard for me sometimes to be able to share my experience with those who have maybe just received a diagnosis or who are going through chemo right now, because like, keep in mind, I was 24 years old. I was very active. I was healthy. And so my body responded pretty well to it. Don't get me wrong. I got sick and I would be tired, but like I never missed a workout in that season. I was able to take walks each day after my chemo infusions. And I remember being like super nauseous and it definitely taking a toll on my body. But if you ask people around me, they'll tell you that they would have never guessed that I was a chemo patient. The other thing too, so like, you know, I think with women specifically, the biggest thing with chemo is like, I'm going to have to lose my hair. And I had been growing out my hair for a really long time at that point. Specifically, I remember having a conversation with someone in college, like a couple years, it was probably like 2012 or something. And I was like, all right, I'm only going to do trims until I get married because I want to have long, beautiful hair on my wedding day. And so I had stuck to that. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, dang, now I'm going to lose all my hair? Are you kidding me? And
the wedding's ruined.
Right. The wedding that was like not even planned at that point. And so I had done a ton of research and ended up finding this organization, and they're called cold caps essentially. So these cold caps have not been approved by the FDA. However, if you go to Europe, it's like what everybody uses who's going through chemo. And there's companies here in Minneapolis who provide the use of it. And again, it's pretty expensive, and it's a very like, you have to at least have a week's time before you start your chemo to get your body prepared for it. And so I ended up being able to use this cold cap, which is I don't know, I would describe it as like a turban kind of. So it was like these cold ice packs, but they were filled with dry ice, and you could keep them on your head for like, I think it was like less than an hour at a time, and then they would have to switch it out. So the concept was that this it would freeze your hair follicles, so the chemo couldn't reach it. And so I ended up doing this during each of my infusions. And it's there's so much more to it. If you have questions, look up cold cap therapy. It's incredible. But I ended up only losing like 30% of my hair. And for people around me who were really close to me, they could tell. And obviously I could tell. But like the vast majority had no idea whatsoever. It was just like this totally, I don't know, it was incredible. And so I feel like for me, that was one less thing that made me feel like a cancer patient. Like people couldn't visibly see like, oh, she lost all of her hair, she must be going through chemo.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me too. I just wanted to maintain normalcy. I wanted people to treat me the same. And, we have like some of our staff had made jokes of like, all right, well, I'm still going to make fun of you and I'm still going to do all these different things. And that's what I wanted. I just wanted things to maintain as much normalcy as we could.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I remember, and you probably don't remember this, but I think it was shortly after, we found out that you had cancer and you were starting your treatment. My wife and I ran into you at Target. You were with one of your friends, and I remember looking at you, and you looked tired, obviously,
oh, yeah.
Rightfully so, but you still looked just full of like life and full of like joy and hope, and not like a fake sense of joy and hope. As a therapist and just, having the Holy Spirit, I feel like I'm pretty good at discerning, when people are kind of faking that. Like you genuinely seemed like full of faith, full of hope that this sucks, but I'm going to overcome this.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus is going to, give me the victory over this.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you had that attitude most of the time. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's peaks and valleys throughout the way, but so you did treatment for 8-9 months, mm-hmm. and September is when you said that you were starting to feel better and kind of more like yourself.
Yeah. So actually, just going back to what you had just said, I remember having a conversation with one of our staff members, and I just remember telling her, like, here's the thing. At the end of the day, there's no getting out of this. Like, I have to go through this season, and that sucks. But something that my dad said this to me my whole life. Your life and its surroundings are a direct reflection of your own attitude. And so I remember thinking, like, in this season, I can choose joy, and I can choose to take away whatever the Lord has for me in this season, and I can choose to be a blessing for people in this season, even on some hard days, or I can just play the victim card and I can relish in that. So which one am I going to choose? And so that's where it was really easy. I feel like the Holy Spirit really did fill me with like such a joy and a confidence and a peace in that time. And it was really cool to experience that.
Yeah. So then going back to September, you're feeling better.
Yep.
When did you kind of get the, coast is clear, you're good, the cancer is gone?
Yeah, I would say that was probably like October, November. I started taking medication. It was like a continued chemo, and so I've taken that for the last 5 years now, and recently was able to recently given the go ahead to go off of it when I feel like I'm ready. A lot of that is just for like purposes of starting a family one day for us, and so I have been taking that pill just as more of like a preventative. But at this point, actually at my last appointment this year, she had said, like, your numbers look great. Things look good. There's really no fear of reoccurrence at this point, which is incredible. I mean,
Praise God.
So cool. Because I recognize, like, all around me, stories are very different. And for me to be able to have the season that, yes, was difficult, but also, like, I often tell people that was like one of the best seasons for me. So many good things came out of that season. Like, my relationship with my husband came out of that season, and me realizing, like, I want to be at River of Life because I love this community. I'm invested into this community. That came out of that season. I gained a better health, information, knowledge on my health and body, and like just more aware of those things. And honestly, the biggest thing was just that my faith was so strengthened. It was a huge, huge blessing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Faith, it sounds like the combination of faith and choosing to have a positive mindset
Big time.
were keys to you getting through this,
Yeah.
obviously along with the treatments and medications, that goes without saying, but that mental battle that's there, because obviously cancer isn't just a physical battle, it's a mental battle.
Right.
It's an emotional battle. And it sounds like you did the battle well.
Thank you. Yeah. Struggled well.
Yes. Struggled
Yep.
well. I like that. I like that. So other than taking that medication, is there any other like follow-up things that you have to do or just be aware of, kind of going forward?
Yeah. So I just, my first few years, I would see the doctor like 3 times a year. That was the first year. Second year went down to 2 times. And once the third year hit, I was able to just go in once a year with her. So just doing like the yearly checkups, making sure, again, like I had said earlier, I have such an awareness now of my body. So I recognize like when things are maybe not right or whatever. And so I've been able at this point, like, I feel like it's just normal. Actually, most times, this sounds terrible, but I forget a lot of the times that I had cancer. People bring it up. I'm like, you're right. I did have that.
That did happen to me. Yeah. When you hear the words, Ashley, you are a cancer survivor, what comes to mind?
Oh man, it's so surreal. It feels like it was a different life for me. But it also, like, I just feel like I have so much joy and even excitement as I think about what's ahead and realizing, like, there's a reason why the Lord let me survive, There's purpose in that survivorship. And so being able now to step into what that purpose is.
It's kind of been a thread throughout this time together is, talking about your husband, Derek, here and there, it sounds like you guys met in college and then ended up working at the same church. So why don't we maybe finish with your little love story there with Derek, as far as tell us how you guys actually got into a relationship. You said it was during your season of chemo and treatments that you guys entered into a relationship.
So kind of. So the running joke is Derek started on staff a year before I did. And the running joke is that Denny hired me with the intention that I would marry him. He totally knew. And so we, like I said, had been friends for quite a few years before that. We've known each other since 2012 and had done worship stuff together in the past. And so when I came on staff here, we hit it off instantly. I mean, I remember at that point, like, really getting to know him better. And if you know my husband, you know that he's very quiet, he's reserved, he's pretty introverted, he seems very serious and just very put together. But realizing, like, he is probably one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. He's got this, like, humor to him that is so dry, and he speaks with intention, and so he jokes with intention too. So I love it. He's sarcastic and he's so funny and he's so filled with wisdom. And I remember just like having these times. So when I was going through chemo, we had at the time I was living with Kirby and Desiree St. John. They're incredible, and we were on a prison break kick. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah. That's taking it back a little bit.
Yes. So it was like old even when we watched it in 2016, but like we loved it. So we watched that. We had watched like, I think it's like 9 seasons or something. I don't know. I might be wrong. But we would watch that like every night while I was going through chemo. And something with chemo is there's steroids. And so like I would struggle to sleep a little bit, which like Kirby and Des and Derek would probably argue that's not true. But I just loved being around people. So even if it meant me falling asleep by everybody, I was like still with them hanging, And so Derek would come over a lot of times. And I remember there were quite a few nights where Kirby and Des would fall asleep on the couch, and then Derek and I would just like stay up talking. And that was especially in that season where I feel like we really, really got to know each other. And so we actually did, that was 2016. We actually didn't start dating until 2017, a year later.
So you guys really took your time with this.
Yes, we did. I understand now. Hindsight is so much better than foresight. But my husband has a really incredible story, but he really struggled with anxiety and commitment and things like that. He too ended up going to counseling just from different things from his past. And it was in that season where he was pursuing counseling and really able to just be freed, I guess, of the bondage, the sin, the destruction, I guess, that he had been facing at the time. So we both were in a very healthy spot, I would say, in 2017 when we started our relationship. A healthier spot, I should say, than we were. Took a lot of growing still. Yeah.
And so you guys start dating. Eventually, he pops the question.
Yes.
You guys get married. I go back to the comment that you made when you were going through chemo, as far as like, who's going to want, a wife who, has to go through all this and,
take the risk.
And, we may get pregnant, we may not get pregnant. And so finding that man, finding Derek, what maybe just kind of a stupid, obvious question, but what was that like to finally find that man of your dreams?
Yeah. I tell people often that I feel like the Lord best reveals his love for me through Derek, because Derek is so gracious and gentle and he listens, and I can be the worst person in the world and he's still just like so patient and kind to me. He carries the fruits of the Spirit so well. And for him, it was like that. Those have never been fears for him whatsoever. When the time comes that we're ready to start a family, it's like something that we talk about with excitement, but it's also like, if that means that our family is through adoption, that's awesome. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Neither of us have that fear. And I think that going back to my thoughts back in 2016 of like, oh my gosh, no one's ever going to want this. That was totally the enemy. I mean, totally the enemy putting those lies in my head. Because I think looking at it now, it seems like so silly to me that I even thought that. Seeing the way that Derek loves me and like he continues to choose me, even knowing like, well, we don't know what the future holds, but I know that I love you and I know that the Lord has his hand in this. So let's just keep moving on the path that he has for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. Ashley, what would you say to people who maybe recently got a cancer diagnosis or in the midst of their battle with cancer? What advice, what encouragement would you give them?
Yeah. This season is not easy. And you're going to hear a ton of information that seems overwhelming and really life-ending. And if you have any type of faith, I can promise you it will be rocked some. But just continuing to go back to the Word, go back to the truth, commit yourself to prayer, and find a support system of people who are going to come around you and pray for you as well is huge. At the end of the day, it's a season that you're going to walk through, but you get to choose your response in that season. And your response is everything. And know that there are going to be hard days, but there's also going to be really good days. And there's so much victory in the end of it, and so much fulfillment and satisfaction in the end of it that, as silly as it sounds, it's worth it. It will be worth it.
Well, Ashley, your story is so inspiring and encouraging, and I just can't help but think about all the amazing plans that God has for you. Looking at the eating disorder, looking at cancer, there's a reason the enemy went so hard after you, right? Mm-hmm. Like you are powerful. You are amazing, and the enemy like tried his best to defeat you and discourage you and to get you off that path that God, called you to, but you've stuck to it. And I think, again, obedience, that's just a word that keeps coming to my mind as I hear your story and as I talk to you, is just your obedience in your faith and trusting God, that God, there's I want things to go a certain way. I would like this to happen. I would like this to happen, but your will be done. Yeah. I will follow you after that. And I think that's such a amazing example for all of us to hear and to see. And you walk it out so well with your life still. Thank you so much again for coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, folks, if that testimony doesn't uplift you and encourage you, I don't know what will. Ashley truly brightens up any room that she walks into, and she's got one of the most vibrant smiles of anyone I've ever met. If you know Ashley and call her a friend, you're blessed for it. If you have any follow-up questions for Ashley's testimony that you'd love to hear her answer, ask your question using the hashtag AskTWT across all the Testimonies with Terry social media pages, and we'll get her to answer some. And to everyone who is currently battling breast cancer, or any cancer for that matter, my prayers are with you, and I want to remind you that through it all, Jesus is with you and He is for you. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week with another testimony, and as always, live your life in such a way that glorifies God and kicks Satan's butt.